Alrighty, everybody, welcome back. Rusty here with the Rugby Review. And this episode, we're going to be going through round 3 of the Investec Champions Cup. And with that being said, let's dive into Pool 1 right now. So we have Pool 1, round 3, and the 3 games that took place for Pool 1 are as followed. So Game 1 was Claremont versus Glasgow. You have Claremont 21, Glasgow 33. Game 2 was the Battle of the Sharks. We have Sale Sharks 26, Hollywood Bets Sharks 10. Third and final game for Pool 1 was the closest game of the week. Saracens versus Toulouse. You have Saracens 20, Toulouse 14. So we're going to take a deeper dive into the Saracens-Toulouse game because it was the closest game of the week for this particular pool. With that being said, this was obviously a very close game between the two teams here. The stats will showcase that pretty easily. And so what we're going to do is zoom in on the top half here. Possession does favor Saracens during the course of this game, while territory favors Toulouse. So you have Saracens holding on to the ball more. However, they are playing in their half of the field more often. Both teams were playing defense pretty much at an equal pace throughout this whole game. As you can see with the tackles made, 137 tackles made for Saracens, 136 made for Toulouse, dead even right there. Now what's interesting is post-contact meters. We have Saracens making more post-contact meters than Toulouse are during the course of this game, showcasing Saracens just being the stronger, much more physically dominant team with ball in hand. And as we move down towards the bottom half here, I think this is really where we're going to see, where the difference was made during the course of this game. And so if we look at turnovers lost, now before I deep dive into this a little bit more, just want to say that the weather during the course of this game was truly awful. It was raining down cats and dogs. I think it was even coming down sideways at one point. So a lot of handling errors by both teams. However, again, look at turnovers lost. 16 turnovers lost for Saracens to 24 for Toulouse. Again, both teams are having a lot of handling errors, but Toulouse is having 20 plus handling errors during the course of the day, which is a gigantic amount for a team that is as well coached as Toulouse is. So if we think back to what the possession and territory stats were, possession favored Saracens, but territory favored Toulouse. Something tells me that this turnovers lost stat is what contributes to that. 24 turnovers lost means Saracens are getting control of the ball more often, which probably would give them a higher amount of possession during the course of the game, even though Toulouse is playing in Saracens' half more often. Anyway, very strong win, very good win for the Saracens, putting them in a good position for making the knockout stages for the quarterfinals in the Investec Cup. So let's actually take a look at Pool 1 standings currently. So you have Glasgow and Sale at the top of the pack here. Now, there's little Q's next to Glasgow and Sale. That just means they have qualified for the quarterfinals. So regardless of what any of the next round's outcomes are, Glasgow and Sale will absolutely be in the round of 16 for the Investec Champions Cup. I don't know how Claremont is still in the running. I figure they would have been eliminated from any mathematical potential. However, Hollywood Bets Sharks still have a chance to make it in if Toulouse were to happen to lose their next game. So again, you have Glasgow, Sale at the top of the charts here, Saracens and Toulouse are not necessarily safe, because if Hollywood Bet Sharks win their next game and get a scoring bonus point, that could be very interesting for both Sale and Saracens if both happen to lose. So, round 4 will have its definite excitement for Pool 1, so we'll have to see how the games pan out. And so let's move into Pool 2 here. Pool 2 goes as follows. So Game 1 was Castra versus Bath. Castra 20, Bath 43. Game 2 was Edinburgh versus Gloucester. Edinburgh 26, Gloucester 24. And third and final, another close game, which was between Toulon and Munster. We have Toulon 27, Munster 25. So the game we're going to be looking at a little bit more in depth is Edinburgh versus Gloucester. So I didn't, unfortunately, get a chance to watch this particular game, but what I read from, like a recap on this game, was Gloucester was the strong team in the first half. Edinburgh was the much stronger team in the second half. So it was a tale of two halves here, even though the stats, I think, are just going to show a very dominant performance by Edinburgh. It was not necessarily the case. So again, it was a very strong first half by Gloucester with a very strong second half by Edinburgh. Again, can't really tell that from the stats here, because if you look at possession and territory, 60+% in favor towards Edinburgh, which normally when you see possession and territory stats so heavily skewed towards one team, the score line is not as close and as competitive as it was for this game. But this just goes to show you how strong of a performance Edinburgh had in the second half to make the stats look like it was just a complete one-sided affair. Now, if we move a little further down, looking at tackles made, Edinburgh only had to make 80 tackles. So that's literally making one tackle per minute during the course of this game. Compared that to Gloucester, who had to make 163 tackles, literally twice the amount. Absolutely huge difference between the two teams there. Again, if I didn't know that this was such a close game or such a tale of two halves, I would have just thought this defensive effort by Gloucester was just absolutely monstrous, and Gloucester would have been really clinical and effective with ball in hand. However, it was just a very strong first half by Gloucester and a strong second half by Edinburgh. And with that strong second half by Edinburgh, they just made it look like it was a complete dominating performance by them. And then we can see that even further down, where Edinburgh has more turnovers won, a significant amount more defenders beaten, and more clean breaks. The one thing that absolutely hurt Gloucester in the second half was the total number of penalties that they gave up. So in the second half, Gloucester gave up enough penalties to concede a yellow card, and that was just, the damn wall breaking open once they got the yellow card. Edinburgh really plowed back, came back in the game, obviously ended up winning too. But the big difference is that penalties conceded, only 8 penalties conceded for Edinburgh to 15 penalties conceded for Gloucester. Huge, huge, huge difference between the two there. I do not care how good of a first half Gloucester has when you're that ill-disciplined that it leads to a yellow card. It's literally leaving the door wide open for your opposition to come back in the game and obviously win the game in this situation. So, very good win for Edinburgh to fight back and come back in this game. Gloucester will have to do some soul-searching over the course of the week. just to mentally get themselves back in to just like a playing condition where, this type of loss where they lose the lead doesn't affect them too much more going forward. Now let's look at Pool 2 standings. And the only team to qualify for Pool 2 right now is Bath. So again, regardless of what the outcomes are for Pool 4, Bath will be qualifying for the round of 16 in the Champions Cup. And as we can see, I think Pool 2 is probably the most competitive as far as the point spread goes, because Castra and Gloucester both can win their games and overtake Munster, Toulon, and Edinburgh and be qualified for the quarterfinal. Well, not the quarterfinal, round of 16. So lots and lots and lots of important games for Pool 2 this upcoming round. So, again, we'll see how things shake out after round 4, excuse me. Now let's move and dive into Pool 3. So Pool 3 here, truthfully speaking, only had one close game, and that was the first game, which was the Leinster-La Rochelle game. This has turned into, I would say it's a bit of a rivalry here, because there's a lot of history here with La Rochelle beating Leinster 2 times previously in Champions Cup finals, and then Leinster has been beating La Rochelle the last 3 times these teams have met, if I remember correctly. Anyway, game 1 between Leinster and La Rochelle, you have Leinster 25, La Rochelle 24. Super close game, super competitive game, won by a last-second penalty kick by Leinster. Game 2 was between Leicester and Bayonne. You have Leicester 57, Bayonne 14. And to me, this is probably one of the more surprising results of the week. Game 3 between Harlequins and Stormers. Harlequins 61, Stormers only 10. I say this is a big surprise to me because of how well Stormers have been doing in their domestic championship. Anyway, the closest game of the week, Leinster-La Rochelle. That's the game we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive on. Now, with as close as this game was, you would have kind of figured that stat-wise, this would be a very, very equal game. Not necessarily the case. I think La Rochelle had a better game, but Leinster's defensive effort is what kept them in this game and then allowed them to win the game as well. So let's look at the top half here. Possession, territory, both skewed quite a bit towards La Rochelle. Almost 60% possession and territory for La Rochelle in this game. And again, I think Leinster relied very heavily on their defensive performance to not only keep them in this game, but to help them win. And you can see that with tackles made. It's not the biggest difference in the world here that we're seeing, but 145 tackles made for Leinster in the blue ink and 109 for La Rochelle in the black ink. Not the biggest difference in the world, but again, just showcasing Leinster having to rely more heavily on their defensive effort. One big thing is the number of tackles missed by Leinster. They almost had 40 tackles missed during the course of this game, which is absolutely gigantic. Again, they squeaked out, they won the game, but La Rochelle, I think, left a lot on the table because of just so many missed tackles by Leinster. They had more possession, had more territory, put Leinster under defensive pressure, but they did not convert very well, allowing Leinster to have an opportunity to win the game. And to really hammer home the point of La Rochelle kind of leaving some on the table, look at post-contact meters. La Rochelle almost had twice the amount. 210 post-contact meters for Leinster, 392 for La Rochelle. La Rochelle just played a really strong game, played a really great game. They just did not convert when they had the opportunity, didn't convert as much as they should have when they had their opportunities. If we look down at the second half here, you can really see that with turnovers lost. Yes, Leinster had a lot of turnovers lost, but so did La Rochelle. So it didn't really matter that Leinster was giving the ball up, because La Rochelle was giving the ball up just as much as Leinster was. And again, you just kind of see all these stats here on La Rochelle's half in the black ink. More turnovers won. Yes, they did have more turnovers lost. Much more disciplined with only 6 penalties conceded during the game. Significantly more defenders beaten. Twice the amount of clean breaks. This is a game where I think La Rochelle will be thinking to themselves that they let one slip away. This was a game that they very, very much could have won, but they didn't. Strong performance by Leinster to give them good momentum rolling into the fourth and final round. So let's take a look at Pool 3's standings. And with the wins this past week by Leinster and Harlequins, both teams are qualified for the round of 16. The only team that realistically has no chance of making it in is Bayonne. They are mathematically completely out of the runnings, so it doesn't matter what they do next week. I mean, maybe they can win to kind of save some face, so that way it doesn't look like they just got blown out every time. But the biggest thing, or like the two bigger games next week, will be La Rochelle's game and Leicester's game. If Leicester wins and La Rochelle loses, then obviously Leicester will make it in. La Rochelle probably won't. And yeah, so it's just, again, it's a big week, big round coming up for Pool 3 as well, especially for La Rochelle and Leicester Tigers. Now let's take a look at Pool 4, the final pool of Round 3. Got some good games here. A lot of high-scoring games, actually. So game 1 was between Vodacom Bulls and Bristol. You had Vodacom Bulls 49, Bristol 61. High-scoring game, fun game right there. Game 2, another high-scoring affair between Scarlets and Poe. Scarlets 38, Poe 47. Final game for Pool 4 was a rematch of last year's final between Bordeaux and Northampton, and just like last year's final, Bordeaux very much got the better of Northampton. You have Bordeaux 50, Northampton 28. So the closest game from this pool this week was the Scarlets Poe game. So that's the game that we are going to take a deeper dive in. And this game was a bit fun to watch. There was a lot of heavy momentum swings between the two teams. So it came out Poe very much the much stronger team at the beginning of the game. Got out to a very comfortable lead. Scarlets fought back into the game to get a lead. And they looked like they were just going to have the momentum riding throughout the second half. And then Poe swung the momentum back in their favor. Got back in the game, won the game here. So obviously you can't really see that too much with the stats here. You can't really see the momentum swings too much, but let's take a closer look anyway. So what we'll see from the very top here, possession and territory favored towards the Scarlets. Scarlets have more ball, putting Poe under more field pressure and defensive pressure on the field. You can kind of see that a little bit with tackles made. Poe is the team in the green ink having to make more tackles during the course of the game. 137 tackles made for Poe to 115 for Scarlets. Again, which makes sense given the possession and territory stats. Now, even though Poe had less possession during the course of the game, they were ever so slightly more effective with that possession. As you can see from post-contact meters, 303 post-contact meters for Scarlets, 328 for Poe. So again, very close, but just showcasing Po being slightly more efficient and effective with ball in hand when they had it on offense. Moving down to the bottom of the stat sheet here, I think the Scarlets maybe left a little bit on the table, but also Po had more defenders beaten, leading to more clean breaks, more scoring opportunities. So Po had a little bit better defensive effort. From a turnovers perspective, they had one more turnover than the Scarlets did. However, Po did have more handling errors, which probably allowed Scarlets to come back into the game and establish a lead at one point in time. However, Scarlets had more missed tackles, leading to more defenders beaten, which then Po was able to utilize for a larger number of clean breaks, which then they were able to use for a larger number of scoring opportunities throughout the game. So, strong win for Po, putting him in a pretty good position heading into round 4. And so let's look at Pool 4 standings right now. And as you could imagine, well, kind of surprising with Northampton losing. They still qualified, but you have Bordeaux, Bristol, both qualifying. Both are 3 from 3. So I'd be kind of surprised if Bordeaux and Bristol are putting out the A teams for round 4. Again, despite the loss this past week, Northampton still qualified for the round of 16. Now, Po does have to win their game. If Po does not win their game and Scarlets do, or the Vodacom Bulls win their game, either one of them can overtake Po and be qualified for the round of 16. So, again, a lot going on here in these pools heading into round 4. So that'll be for next episode. So stick around for next episode where we will be going over round 4 of the Investec Champions Cup. And as always, if anybody likes the video, feel free to hit the like button, subscribe, drop a comment if you have any comments to make. Let's talk about what's going on. Thanks for watching, and I will see you for the next video, everybody. Have a good one.